Wonderful brothers and sisters, these are the most exciting moments during the General Conference at the time. Very, very exciting moments. It really refreshed my mind and I was really rejuvenated. Very, very exciting moments. Just listen to this. It's hot in here.
Brethren, I know what you're thinking. And you're thinking that I want to be comfortable, which is true.
I was in a meeting once when the speaker stood at the pulpit and never seen an audience like this. He looked left, he looked right, and said thank you and sat down. He left all the time to me. A young couple, Lisa and John, moved into a new neighborhood. One morning while they were eating breakfast, Lisa looked out the window and watched her next door neighbor hanging out her wash. "That laundry's not clean," Lisa exclaimed. "Our neighbor doesn't know how to get clothes clean." John looked on but remained silent. Every time her neighbor would hang out her wash to dry, Lisa would make the same comments. A few weeks later, Lisa was surprised to glance out her window and see a nice, clean wash hanging in her neighbor's yard. She said to her husband, "Look, John, she's finally learned how to wash correctly. I wonder how she did it." John replied, "Well, dear, I have the answer for you. You'll be interested to know that I got up early this morning and washed our windows."
Brother Monson, I'm looking for you to dye your hair. The story is told that reporters were interviewing a man on his birthday. He had reached an advanced age. They advised him, they asked him how he had done it. He replied, "When my wife and I were married, we determined that if we ever got in a quarrel, one of us would leave the house. I attribute my longevity to the fact that I have breathed good, fresh air throughout my married life."
You may have heard the story, and it is a story of the disruptive, noisy boys in a Sunday school class who were asked by their exasperated teacher why they bothered to attend Sunday school. One of the more impudent boys replied, "We came to see you perform a miracle." The teacher walked slowly over to the boy and menacingly responded, "We don't perform miracles here, but we do cast out devils."
And the Savior, you'll recall, said, "O ye of little faith, little faith. If ye had but the faith of the tiny," trying to think the name of that little tree.
Mustard.
The what?
Mustard.
The mustard. If you had but the faith of the mustard seed. Thank you, President. I keep the President around to help me here.
It's interesting, too, how we create cumulatively expectations in the lives of our grandchildren, even when we're not aware of it. Some years ago, when our grandson Robbie was about 5, we dropped by to see his family in Orem. He was asleep upstairs, and his mother called, "Robbie, Grandpa Neil is here." A tired little voice floated downstairs, saying, "Shall I bring my scriptures?" Of course, he's too young to read them, but he carried them, as so many do in the church today, in that fine new pattern.
Have you ever seen an angry driver who, when someone else makes a mistake, reacts as though that person has insulted his honor, his family, his dog, and his ancestors, all the way back to Adam? Or remember when our daughter went on a blind date, which we really didn't approve? She was all dressed up and waiting for her date to arrive when the doorbell rang. In walked a man who seemed a little old, but she tried to be polite. She introduced him to me and my wife and the other children. Then she put on her coat and went out the door. We watched as she got into the car, but the car didn't move. Eventually our daughter got out of the car, red-faced, and ran back into the house. The man she thought was her blind date had actually come to pick up another of our daughters who had agreed to be a babysitter for him and his wife. We all had a good laugh over that. In fact, we couldn't stop laughing. Later, when our daughter's real blind date showed up, I couldn't come out to meet him because I was still in the kitchen laughing. Now I realize that our daughter could have felt humiliated and embarrassed, but she laughed with us, and as a result, we still laugh about it today.
Some years later, I was called to serve in another bishopric. Again, this love of developed as we had opportunity to meet so often to direct the affairs of the ward. A little over a year later, a change was to be made in our stake presidency. The bishop and I were called in to be interviewed by the general authority who was making the change. The first question the general authority asked was, "How do you get along with your bishop? Is he a good leader?" Then I started to express in glowing terms my love and appreciation for this man and all he had done for the ward. Suddenly I realized the purpose of the interview. They could call him into the stake presidency, and we would lose our association. I immediately stopped my compliments on his great service. Then after a pause, I said with a little smile on my face, "The only difficulty he has is when he's under pressure, he goes home and beats his wife." The general authority leaned back in his chair and said, "Isn't that peculiar? He was in here just a minute ago and said, you also have leadership capabilities, but you also have a fault. You like to go out behind the barn on an occasion and smoke a cigar." The interview was a failure. I was called into the stake presidency.
Clip B. Whatever you can picture, you can generate. Want something wild like a man closes his laptop and transforms into...
Brother Ballard, my dear wife went to the hospital not long ago. She left a note behind for the children. "Dear children, do not let Daddy touch the microwave." comma, or the stove, or the dishwasher, or the dryer. I'm embarrassed to add any more to that list.
Years ago, I supervised the Indian seminaries. On a visit to a school in Albuquerque, the principal told me of an incident that happened in a first grade class. During a lesson, a kitten wandered into the room and distracted the youngsters. It was brought to the front of the room so all could see it. One youngster asked, "Is it a boy kitty or a girl kitty?" The teacher, unprepared for that discussion, said, "It doesn't matter, it's just a kitten." But the children persisted, and one little boy said, "I know how we can tell if it's a boy kitty or a girl kitty." The teacher, cornered, said, "All right, you tell us how we can tell if it's a boy kitty or a girl kitty." The boy answered, "We can vote on it."
64 years ago this September, I returned home from my mission in England. 3 days after returning, I attended a Hello Day dance at the University of Utah with a friend of mine. He told me about a beautiful sophomore named Barbara Bowen, who he thought I ought to meet. He brought her over and introduced us, and we started to dance. Unfortunately, this was what we used to call a tag dance, which meant that you only got to dance with the girl until somebody else tagged you out. Barbara was vivacious and popular, so I only got to dance with her for less than a minute before another young man tagged me out. That was just not acceptable to me. Having learned the importance of follow-up on my mission, I got her telephone number and called her the very next day to ask her out. But she was busy with school and social commitments. Thankfully, my mission taught me to be persistent, even in the face of discouragement. And I was eventually able to make a date, and that date led to others. Somehow, during those dates, I was able to convince her that I was the only true and living returned missionary, at least as far as she should be concerned.
At our last conference 6 months ago, as I stood here by President Hinckley, he encouraged me to wave to you. And I used all the energy that I had. I've heard from some people who thought I was waving a farewell. But I've come here today to indicate to you and to tell you I'm back. And I don't have anyone else pushing my arm for me.
Sometime I'd like to go on tour with Peter Vidmar. I think we'd make a great team. He could perform and I could sprinkle the rosin on his hand. And Peter, if you're interested in that kind of an arrangement, let me know. My deal is 50-50. Let me tell you another incident that indicates President Kimball looks upon himself as our minister and servant. A few years ago, I was in my office about 6:30 a.m. I am mentioning that so you'll know that I was there early. It takes some of us a little longer. My phone rang, and as I answered it, I recognized that special voice that said, "Marvin?" I replied, "Yes, President Kimball." He said, "Could I come up and see you?" His office is on the first floor and mine's on the third. That's the only time I'm ever higher than he is. My reply was, President Kimball, if you want to see me, I will be right down. He then responded with, would you do that? He did not exhibit any authority. There was no feeling of, do you know who this is, or you'd better come?
My brethren, I reiterate that as holders of the priesthood of God, it is our duty to live our lives in such a way that we may be examples of righteousness for others to follow. As I pondered how we might best provide such examples, I thought of an experience I had some years ago while attending a stake conference. During the general session, I observed a young boy sitting with his family on the front row of the stake center. I was seated on the stand. As the meeting progressed, I began to notice that if I crossed one leg over the other, the young boy would do the same thing. If I reversed the motion and crossed the other leg, he would follow suit. I would put my hands in my lap, and he would do the same. I rested my chin in my hand, and he also did so. Whatever I did, he would imitate my actions. This continued until the time approached for me to address the congregation. I decided to put him to the test. I looked squarely.
The WVBS Online Bible School is designed to provide you with an online, comprehensive, in-depth study of the Bible.
Squarely at him, certain I had his attention, and then I wiggled my ears. My wife told me not to say that. He made a vain attempt to do the same, but I had him. He just couldn't quite get his ears to wiggle. He turned to his father, who was sitting next to him, and whispered something to him. He pointed to his ears and then to me. As his father looked in my direction, obviously to see my ears wiggle, I sat solemnly with my arms folded, not moving a muscle. The father glanced back skeptically at his son, who looked slightly defeated. He finally gave me a sheepish grin, shrugged his shoulders.
Those were the exciting moments of the general conferences, and you can see there are some very old leaders, apostles, and all that who were very powerful at a time, very, very powerful. And I listened also to President Monson, and I always missed his talks. He was photographic. He had a photographic memory. He was so powerful, very, very powerful. That is what tells you that this church has had many powerful leaders who have come, and many also who are being called. You know, that is the exciting moments of the General Conference. Otherwise, thank you very much. God bless you. Looking forward to see you again next time. Thank you.